Whoa.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Dalten Collection Debut. I'm SICDev Pilnup, the management proxy for the Dalten Collective. The Dalten Collective is a collectively owned and managed star on the Urbit network. And today we have several of our members displaying art that they have created that is all Urbit related NFTs. And what that means is a little bit different for each artist, and we're going to spend some time with each one of them later on. But we also have a special guest with us today. This is our initial and our inaugural opening, and we have a very special guest, Jake Brookman, who is the founder of CoinFund, also a Galaxy holder, which is also pretty fantastic, and an NFT artist in and of pretty prolific as well. So we're really thankful for Jake taking some time out of his day to come and talk with us about NFTs and Urbit and all the things that he's seeing out in the sort of the marketplace right now. And just a couple quick things before we get started. There is the items that are on the walls are for sale, and there is a link in the space. But also, if everybody's not, there's a link. I'll put the link in the chat here. And it is some bidding software that allows you to bid on individual items in the show today. And what you need is some email that the artist can contact you with and some name that you would like to give. And whatever price you bid is between you and that artist. And after we conclude the bidding today, then we will then the artist will reach out to the highest bidders. And then they will settle afterwards. So the bidding software is just a record of silent. It's not exactly silent because you can see who's the highest bidder. But all of that software was built in Hoon using an Urbit ship and is being hosted by an Urbit ship. So that's pretty cool. So we will actually do some more content about that later, about how that's all running. But please do go ahead and check that out. After Jake's talk, there will be breakout rooms with each of the artists. We're going to do 10 minutes with each artist. And then I will jump into those rooms and let everybody know that to switch so that each artist can have some time to explain or answer questions about their art. And to find those breakout rooms, you'll go to the bidding software and then choose the artist on the dropdown. And then the Jitsi link that's just to the right of the dropdown will change to their room. Okay? And this particular room is being recorded. So if you don't want your face, just turn it off. And the other breakout rooms will not be recorded. So those, don't worry about that. All right. So without any further ado, Jake, please take it away.
Thanks, Kenny. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Kenny and I have known each other for a very, very, very long time in crypto years. It's probably been like a million crypto years at this point. So thanks. I've always appreciated everything that Kenny's done in the space, and this particular initiative is no exception. I'll skip kind of the background here, except to say that CoinFund, obviously, which is my organization, we've been an early investor like in the NFT space and in the self-sovereign identity and data space, Urbit included. And on the art side, NFTs, art, and that vertical in general has been a passion vertical for me because besides being a technologist, I've created art like all my life, and I have some NFTs out there that I've created. I've sold some, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe, Kenny, if you think it's appropriate, I'll try to save a few minutes at the end if anyone has like questions about anything I talk about or in general. And what I'll try to cover in this talk is just like a little bit about NFTs and a little bit about self-sovereign identity and data and why it's important. And we could talk a little bit about like Urbit and how it plays into that. So let me start with like, what is an NFT? And the reason that I say is because people seem to treat this as like NFTs as some kind of law of nature, like we're discovering what NFTs are. But the truth is, NFTs are a design choice. Like we can choose to implement NFTs this way or that way. In some ways, it might be better than others. And I wrote an article on the CoinFund blog recently as we were investing in Rarible, which is called "All Digital Content is Going On-Chain," in which I suggest like how should we define an NFT. And we always start at art, which I like super appreciate. I run a digital art gallery called firstedition.xyz. I'll put the put the link here in case anyone wants to take a look. But really, like, it goes so far beyond that. So let me talk a little bit about like the broad definition of NFT that I think is really important, and then we can maybe talk a little bit about kind of the applications. So I like to phrase NFTs as liquid intellectual property, especially for digital content. And what that means is like the blockchain record gives the creator the ability to confer property rights on digital content to a buyer. And those rights could be things like you have the right to own, the right to sell, the right to make money from, the right to use in the movie, the right to lend out, the right to earn a royalty stream on, whatever we think of like normally as property. And the like sort of the object of that verb, right, is digital content. And so the first thing that this was applied to was art in collectibles, like CryptoKitties and Block Cities and Axie Infinities, and also in-game assets like those googly eyes and on my avatar in CryptoVoxels. I also posit that you could apply that same structure to many, many other different kinds of digital content besides art. So you could do 3D models, you could do stock photos, you could do icons, you could do fonts, you could do movies, you could do podcasts, you could do the plugins that you guys probably use in your audio software when you record stuff on those big microphones. You could do Photoshop plugins, like all kinds, AR. We didn't even get to AR. But there's like this really, really long tail of things that this liquid intellectual property structure could be applied to. And arguably, while art is like a $2 to $3 trillion market, and while arguably going digital with NFTs will probably make it even bigger, that long tail of things, if you start to sum it up and put it onto, decentralized marketplaces, will probably be just as big as that, or more. And so that's the exciting thing about the opportunity, is that this formalization of our NFTs as liquid intellectual property rights, turns digital content into its own financial asset class. And that financial asset class broadly has always been very illiquid. It's lived in like private contracts, like Taylor Swift's music portfolio. And in the act of putting them into a digital form like this and making it tradable on the blockchain, we're effectively taking that asset class public. And this event is probably one of the biggest financial events, biggest IPOs of all time. So that's like super, super interesting. And art is a huge part of that. And it's so exciting. And the really exciting part is not when Beeple sells the $69 million thing. The exciting part for me is it's that middle market participant. It's that person who hasn't been able to sell their art before or to earn a living sustainably doing what they love, which perhaps is art. It's when they can find a business model, can quit their job, and can sit there at home doing the thing that they love and actually get paid for it in a fair way. So that's like the value proposition of NFTs for me, is the unleashing of the monetization of creativity. And I'll tell you a little bit about the projects that I'm excited about in the NFT space. So we are investors from very early on, almost like in a contrarian bet, in Dapper Labs and the Flow blockchain. And those guys have been seeing incredible success with NBA Top Shot NFTs moments. There was one day recently where they earned $38 million of revenue in a day, which is more than all of CryptoKitties revenue combined for 4 years of the whole existence of CryptoKitties. And they have tens of thousands of mainstream users, basketball fans, who are buying these things. So they kind of cracked the mainstream problem. I'm also proud to be, and CoinFund is as well, the pre-seeder of Rarible.com. This is a team that I love, that I work with almost every day for over a year. And I think what they're building is just incredibly important for the NFT space. in the following sense. They're not, they look like a marketplace, they look like a website today, but what they are actually building is Rarible protocol. In the same way that decentralized exchanges have created protocols for fungible exchange, Rarible protocol is the exchange protocol for non-fungible exchange. And in the same way that AMMs have competed for that volume, I think we'll also see a market of non-fungible protocols compete for the volume and distribution and issuance sort of markets for NFTs. And it's very early in that game. There's only a few players in that game today. But like whenever I see a marketplace, like a new marketplace pops up that sells NFTs, I'm like, oh, it's just a matter of time before they run on some kind of NFT exchange protocol. And my hope is that that protocol will be Rarible because I'm the investor there. So so those are two like really important projects that I'm excited about. And I'm also, you know, I'm an angel investor in async.art. I think they're doing incredible things with programmable visual art. And just today they released programmable music, right? So this speaks to that long tail of media that's possible to put on the blockchain in NFT form. I'm also a member of Flamingo DAO, which is an organization, you might have heard of the $760,000 CryptoPunk purchase. That was Flamingo. I'm an investor in a few NFT funds and things like that, and really have done a lot of work in, you know, in kind of with various founders like in the space. The next thing for NFTs, guys, is the idea of liquidity. Everyone for years has been saying, oh, this is such an illiquid asset class, it's never going to be liquid. But just like AMMs have turned tokens very liquid, we're about to see mechanism design turn NFTs very liquid. And in fact, NFTs will be one of the biggest, like most liquid asset classes, like period, in a few years. That's my prediction. What enables that is things like fractionalization. If you look at niftex.com, what enables that also, and this is a little bit more under the radar, but if you guys check out upshot.io, this is an on-chain question and answer protocol that will help to evaluate NFTs in a totally decentralized manner. And once you have on-chain valuations, you can tokenize them, and then you can apply liquidity mining, and then you get liquidity. And I predict that all NFTs, no matter how cheap, will be liquid very shortly. So that's a little bit about NFTs. And then let me just talk a little bit about data and identity, because that's very relevant also to the Urbit network. What's the relationship between like NFTs and maybe even like art NFTs and identity? Well, if you talk to anyone at like Sotheby's and Christie's and stuff who are in the business of selling valuable art, they'll tell you that a lot of the value is locked into like who the artist is and what the provenance of the work has been. So if your work was owned by, I don't know, Michael Jackson at some point, right, it's going to be a lot more valuable. If well-known people own it, or if it hung in the MoMA at some point, or if Gagosian had it at some point. And both the identity of the creator and the identity of the collectors of the work play an integral role in blockchain. In the valuation of art, and the blockchain enables us to keep track of them in this like very high fidelity manner. What's super interesting is that it's been like 5 years and no one's like cracked the identity problem yet. I mean, we really need it. There's a black hole in Ethereum and elsewhere where identity should be. And I think like we're now finally coming to this point where that problem will get solved like dramatically well. The challenge of that problem is that you need to coordinate like a lot of people into only like a few solutions. And I think token models and like incentives will go a long way of toward doing that. We're investors in a company called 3Box Labs, which is releasing a network called Ceramic Network, which will enable kind of self-sovereign ownership of data. And they also are building IDX.xyz on top of it. Naturally, we're also investors in Urbit, which is doing identity work. And I think actually those networks could be synergistic in certain ways. And in any case, both solutions will exist. I'll just leave you with the following kind of practical thought about like NFTs and identity. So you guys see how Jack sold his tweet for $2.5 million the other day? The mainstream world was in shock. They said, how could it be that someone can sell a screenshot of a tweet for $2.5 million? And there's a very simple way of resolving that philosophical dilemma, which is to say, well, he sold his autograph, just a digital version of his autograph. And so if you believe that autographs are valuable, then you should be willing to believe that Jack's autograph digitally is also valuable. And that's what he sold. And that's okay. Like that kind of philosophically gets us to like, maybe like if you believe that, that's enough, to see why people would pay, $2.5 million for that. But the much stronger value proposition in selling a tweet is if you owned the data record of that tweet. And that's not true on Twitter today. You don't own it. Twitter owns it. With networks like Urbit, with networks like Ceramic, with networks like Arweave, with networks like IPFS and others, we actually can now do this. We can own in a self-sovereign way the data records of the content that we create. And when we can own them, then it becomes it becomes philosophically easier to argue that when I sell this to you for $2.5 million, I'm selling you my property, my intellectual property. And so, that's why I think identity and data are like really, really important. So let me just say about Urbit, like I super appreciate, we're early investors. We've been participating in every like digital asset sale at Urbit since like 2016. Work with the team periodically. Most recently, I was working on the problem of NFT liquidity with them because galaxies are NFTs and stars are NFTs and so on. And I also noticed that there is a overlap with the Urbit community and kind of the crypto community, but there's Urbit members who are not as into crypto as others. And so like, I love the fact that you guys are kind of synergizing Urbit with NFTs and Ethereum and crypto voxels and all of these things. I think what Urbit enables is it kind of brings the decentralization that we're all collectively working on, these decentralization technologies like lower in the stack, lower into the internet protocols. And I think that's bullish. I think like we live in a world where having, decentralization is a very important check on, governments, on institutions that are in many ways are failing to do their job today. That's been a theme, certainly is a theme this decade. So let me stop there and we have just a few minutes, but maybe if anyone has any questions. Go for it, Kenny.
And so you mentioned something interesting there, sort of like an NFT as a representation of intellectual property. And when I think about IP, I think about lawyers specifically.
Yeah.
And when you mention people's head exploding because Jack is selling a tweet, in some way he kind of owns the IP for that because he's kind of like owning. He doesn't actually own Twitter, but let's just say he by proxy might have some actual intellectual property with that, specifically because like that was one of his first tweets, right? Could you imagine a scenario in which the legal structures that we currently have uphold the copyright, and when people say things like, "Well, I can just screenshot that, thing, and then I have it," could there be a point at which you could say, "Yes, you could do that, but then I can also sue you"? Is that possible?
I mean, I think intellectual property rights sort of apply by default because law exists, right? And we're all in some jurisdiction where there are hopefully laws, and so all the usual intellectual property rules apply whether you're on the blockchain or not. Now, what's interesting to me is a lot of like when I say these things like liquid IP, these crypto lawyers, they go after me. They're like, no, you can't have IP without law, and like you can't have law without government, and it's all like a big philosophical exercise for them. But where I'm coming from is like I'm interested in the concepts. And when I say property rights, I'm kind of saying like the philosophical notion of property rights, but the implementation of that notion could be legal contracts, but it also could be like on-chain dispute resolution, or it could be like the boundaries of a smart contract. And so I'm, as a technologist, I'm kind of like open to many different solutions of how to enforce, the rules that are intended. Like as a creator, like I want to give like my NFT holders like the ability to do certain things and not do other things. And how that gets enforced predominantly will be through law today, and increasingly will be through some kind of on-chain technology going forward.
Can I ask a quick question? This is I'll turn my camera on so it's easier. Here, I'm Tom. I'm a comics publisher, and I'm interested in sort of the intersection between NFTs and physical objects. Is there some kind of like, like if I'm publishing a comic book, it's a multiple of like, I don't know, a couple thousand copies, 10,000 copies, whatever. Each one of those things is, valuable, within whatever the value of the comic is. Then obviously we also sell like, whatever PDFs or digital books or whatever. Is like an NFT would it be kind of could it potentially be sort of a replacement for that, like for the digital copy, where you own a sort of a limited edition of, whatever 1,000 copies of this comic is now available via whatever bunch of NFTs. What is there a relationship between sort of the NFTs and sort of physical world and that kind of thing? Like, curious because there are, there's a huge world of artists who are still doing work, with physical objects. Yeah. So what's what is that relationship, or is there one?
So I think like the digital content is sort of the low-hanging fruit, and the long-term view is that physical, not content, but like physical goods also will go on chain in the form of NFTs eventually. When I say physical goods, it will be like the deeds to houses and the deeds to your car, and maybe assets like like comic books and so on. It's just that it's harder to create that link today because you need some kind of technology that draws a dotted line from the blockchain record to the physical world. Now, as we digitize our world with RFIDs and hardware and AR and all this stuff, I think that becomes easier. Today, people do it too. I own an artwork by an artist called Dmitry Cherniak, whose works are on the front page of the art gallery. And I was the guy like 2 years ago who really encouraged him to do his first NFT. And the physical print of that NFT hangs in my kitchen, but the digital twin of that NFT or the NFT hangs in the gallery. And so we've seen that a bunch, right? There's also a company called infiniteobjects.com where you can like print a video or still artwork into like a digital picture frame. So right now it's kind of like ad hoc. It's sort of like whatever you as the creator want. And I think over time those relationships like strengthen through technology, law, dispute resolution, and so forth.
All right.
Quick note on that. If anybody is also interested in the one-way conversion of those things, that's what Dashius Navnal, one of our artists here, is exploring. The idea of something physical that was then destroyed and then reified on the digital end, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
I have a question. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I have a question. I'm just now checking out the async project that you mentioned. That's super cool. I do a lot of generative music, web-based stuff. And so just in my cursory glance here, it seems like this is a way of like distributing the stems for people to recombine on their own. Is that the gist of it, or does the finished product actually come as like a remix?
So the idea like of async in general is that you have like different layers. So if you think about visual art, you have like different layers, and then you combine the layers into a master. Every layer can be owned by a separate owner, and the master can be owned by a separate owner as well. The people who own layers can change their states. So like you could be the master owner, but someone else can change the color of your of what you're seeing when you look at the artwork. And then if you like transfer that idea into music, what that means is you have many tracks. That's like the analog to the layer, and then different people can own the tracks, and someone owns the whole song. And someone could come along, a track owner could come along and switch it out. Maybe it's Christmas and you add a guitar solo, for the Christmas time, and whatever it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Wow, that's super cool. I'd be curious, just from your perch, what you see as some of the most interesting ways of distributing generative content. I know like what Artblocks is doing, they're like running processing scripts that use the transaction hash. That's a lot of stuff that I'm exploring and super interested in.
Yeah, I think like the generative art platforms are, they're issuance platforms, we call them. And the same is true of async. In async, you go to issue programmable media. In something like Artblocks, you go to issue generative art. And you can actually take that quite far, because what's interesting about platforms like ethblock.art and Artblocks is that the issuance process is like collaborative. Normally, an NFT is like someone, just uploading their work, but in that context, it's like the creator of the algorithm provides the algorithm, and then the minters of the generative works provide some of their input into like what the generative art looks like at the end. And so what's super interesting about that is it creates a swarm of people that like out of the gate are like really like have a strong connection to this kind of series of generative art works.
Very cool. Thank you.
Kenny, I don't want to like run over your timeline here, so I'm happy to pause here. But if anyone wants to get in touch with me on these topics, my DMs on Twitter are open, and I'm pretty collaborative. So reach out.
Excellent. Thanks, Jake. Well, let's transition into the breakout room. And Talkrix, could you ring the bell, and then we'll open up the bidding.
Of course.
Okay, so that's our bell. And then hopefully Raps, if anyway. So please go ahead and find the artist that you'd like to talk to, just from that drop-down menu in the bidding software. Click on the link, and then we'll spend about 10 minutes with each artist, and then we'll switch. And so I'll come into each one of those rooms when it's time to switch. And then at the very end, after you've had a chance, we'll come back here for just some closing remarks. And we're going to leave the bidding open for a couple more hours. So if you don't have time right now to go into the bidding software, we will leave that open. But yeah, so go ahead, take a look at that right now. And we'll meet back here in about 35-40 minutes. Okay, thanks.